Hey everybody, welcome back to Mimi's Mixed Bag. I thought it would be fun to participate in Dixie Debutantes Happily Married tag. I like the idea that she left it open to everyone, and a lot of these tags are beginning to open up to everyone because unless someone is your subby, unless they're subscribed to your channel, they don't know that you've tagged them and things like that. So I'm really glad and hope that one of my subbies will participate as well. So let me go ahead and get started. And I think someone said it had 17 questions regarding your marriage, and so we'll get started. The first one is, did you date much before you met your husband? Well, let me go ahead and preface this whole tag saying that this is my husband and I's second marriage. We were both married before. My husband was married to his high school sweetheart, and it just lasted a few years and no children. And I was married for 10 years, and I have 2 children by my first husband. And so, and even before then, we had, high school relationships and college relationships and things like that, but not, so that's who we dated before we actually got married. All right, did online dating exist when you were dating? Well, matter of fact, it did. It was very, scrutinized at that time, only because I met my husband online. Where I first met him, it was America Online. I think just about everybody had that internet service back in that time, like 1997. We met in what's called a chat room. He certainly was a complete stranger, and it was actually those chat rooms were kind of characterized into different topics. This just happened to be a Memphis one. And so I knew, people I were talking to were strangers. You only knew their screen name. And I started talking to this guy through IM, and that meant instant message. And so we started talking, and he started telling me that he was, divorced, and I told him I was in the process of a divorce and things like that. And so we just really became friends. Nothing more than that. We chatted for several months before, we ever brought it to the telephone. Even in the telephone, I can only imagine what he looked like. He sounded cute and all that, but I really wasn't looking at him in that light anyway. He was strictly a friend. We talked about marriage. He talked about what he was looking for. I would tell him, some of my problems, and he would tell me how he handled it. And it was just a stranger, just a neutral sounding board when I first met him. And so there was no romantic anything when we first met. Well, it wasn't long after that my husband and I progressed, and he moved out, and that's when things got a little different, after my husband moved out. Okay, all right, let's see. The next question is, where do you think are the best places to meet a great guy? Well, I think that any place is a good place to meet a great guy if, I guess it just depends on the situation. If you are a single person and you're trying to find, some companionship or a friend, I've got several single friends that, their standards are so high as far as not saying a cuss word, can't drink a beer, just whatever the case may be, no kids, whatever. Well, after you're 30 years old, you're limiting yourself to, finding those situations, and so you've got to, have an open mind and realize that, you've got to look deep inside a person and not just some of those things, as far as drinking a beer every once in a while. It just depends on what your convictions are, really. And I've got a friend that, has such high standards, and I admire for that, but she's willing to stay by herself in order to, find that perfect someone. And she very well may one day, but, I certainly didn't, you know, I certainly wouldn't have spent my time on someone not worthy even in the beginning, but, you know, at some point in time, you've got to present yourself in a way that you're wanting to meet someone. You know, don't go out of the house every day in a sweatshirt and ponytail and no makeup. You know, you've got to present yourself in a way that you want to meet someone, and, you know, spread the word. You know, that's how, as an adult, unless you're in a bar or church or you know someone, I mean, that's the only way. Okay, let's see. What dating advice have or will you give your daughter? Well, that's beating a dead horse there. I gave her lots of advice when she was a teenager. Probably one of the biggest ones was, you know, even though I wasn't encouraging her to look for a husband at 15 and 16 years old, but I certainly was teaching her to look at character. You know, look at the type of family he was from. You know, was he active in church? And you know, just those types of things. You know, don't waste even one date on someone that you know is not going to be right. You know, and so, and I have to say, I mean, I met several young fellas that she would bring home, and she always had a good judge of character, and they were really sweet guys. I've had 2 or 3 just bawling and squalling at my back door, wanting to know, you know, why they broke up or whatever the case may be. So we laugh about it now. But anyway, she always had a very good judge of character. And so that was one bit of advice she always took. But there were some other things that, you know, I advised her on that, you know, have come into light now that she says, you know, you were so right back then. And so, all right, let's see. The next one is, how did you meet your husband? Well, I told you that. We met online. And so after, let me pick up from where I left the story off. You know, after my husband moved out, you know, Brian and I were still just friends. I mean, we were so reserved in making our friendship more than friends. We just took it so slow. I was scared to death. Honestly, he said he was scared to death too, just because we were friends, and we had been friends for several months. You know, during that whole process. I mean, he, you know, and it was just weird. Even though we had talked on the phone for so much, even when we started meeting face to face, it was so funny that we laughed that it was really hard to look each other in the face, because we were not used to that. Because it, you know, you knew somebody so well. It seemed like you knew someone's heart so well, but you didn't know their face, and it was just the weirdest feeling the first, you know, a few weeks of us getting to know each other face to face. But anyway, let's see, how did you meet your husband? How old were you? Well, he was 29 and I was 30. Is how old we were. Did you play hard to get? Well, that kind of plays back to the answer that we were just so reserved in trying to make our friendship more than friends that, you know, we both were just, you know, taking it slow. You know, we were in no rush. I had just gotten, you know, my husband and I were in the process of a divorce, and I certainly was not ready to jump back into something. And, you know, and he knew that, you know, I was a package deal, and, you know, that just took time. You know, I mean, it was 6 months after at that point that I let him meet my children, because I just didn't, you know, now my husband at that time had already moved on and had a girlfriend, and my children had already met her and things like that. My husband was moving really fast, and that scared me enough to where I said, you know, I'm not doing that. And so it was well into the 6 months before I let him meet my kids. Did you know that he was the one right away? No, simply for the fact that we were strictly just friends. And then after, you know, my husband officially moved out is when I even entertained the idea of him being more than a friend. Did he know you were the one? Well, let's just say this, and this is kind of the next question. What qualities did your husband love about you when you were first dating? I mean, he used to tell me all the time, and still does, that he had a checklist, and that, and with me being a school teacher, he said, you know, I made an A+. And I always quickly respond and say, look, buddy, you know, I had a checklist too, and he certainly aced his checklist too. But you know, we all the time tell each other that. Let's see. Did you have a timeline for marriage? Well, not really, because that was the furthest thing from my mind. I would say when we hit the 2-year mark, of exclusively dating, it's when I said something to him. I said, don't get me wrong. I'm not looking for anybody else. But, after 2 years, where's this kind of going? I kind of confronted him. And at first I think he was kind of surprised. But on another hand, he knew that he knew we were madly in love with each other. And 3 months later, he proposed. That was at Christmas time, and exactly 2 years later is that Christmas. 2 years later, I said, I confronted him, and then my birthday was in March, and he gave me an engagement ring. He proposed in March. And then from that March to the following year, we were engaged a whole 12 months. I mean, I told him I wasn't, and that next question was, did you have to nudge your husband for marriage? I mean, yeah, I did have to nudge him, but I just really wanted to be engaged. I wanted to kick our relationship up another notch, and I was perfectly content a whole nother year being engaged. Just knowing where we were going and knowing that, that he was as serious as I was, and that he was just as crazy about me as I was him. And so we were engaged 12 whole months before we decided to get married. How did your parents influence the kind of marriage you wanted? Well, Brian and I both had similar backgrounds. Our parents both broke up at 12 years old, and his dad was kind of moved away, and my dad kind of moved away, and so we have a lot of similarities when it comes to thinking about how we were raised, and just some of our memories of just the just the ugly parts of divorce and things like that, of being the innocent victim in a situation, and so that's the main thing, is that we both married the first time, with the full intentions of never getting divorced. Well, you have no idea what you're doing at 19 and 20. Most people don't, and for me, I just wanted to play house, and for him, it was just a high school thing that went too far, and it's just, after we got a few years into it, we just realized that we really weren't meant for each other, and so it's just, the love kind of fizzled out for both of us and both of our relationships, and so anyway, I think that's why we were just so reserved and patient the second time around. All right, what did you love most about your wedding? Well, just the fact that my kids were so happy that we did that. I certainly wouldn't have done it if my kids were not happy. I mean, they were my first and foremost priority, and he was such a wonderful influence and a wonderful person to my kids that I couldn't ask. I mean, my children have a father, but he was just an added bonus, and so we had a beautiful wedding, and my son. My son and daughter were both in it. It was just the four of us up there, and that's what I do love about our wedding. And plus, the whole wedding was, even our vows and everything was presented. And do you take Kendra, Keith, and Cindy? I mean, he was marrying all three of us. He wasn't just marrying me. So we thought that was very important. Let's see. What elements of your wedding didn't matter as much as you thought they would? Well, the only thing I can think of I wish I would have done different, Brian had a big white wedding the first time, and I had a big white wedding the first time, and with bridesmaids and the whole setup. And, and I thought, after 3 years, when we were engaged, after about 2.5 years, I realized that, I didn't want to skimp our marriage. I mean, what if it did last forever? And that would, I just had a different feeling. And I just knew it was going to last forever. And I just didn't want to go to Justice of the Peace. I just didn't want to hold a bouquet of flowers and go to the Justice of the Peace. I just couldn't stand it. And so we did have a little candlelight ceremony at our church we were going to, and then spent a lot of money on on a big reception with a DJ and dancing and an open bar, and that's where we spent all the money. I mean, we had out-of-town guests. I mean, we did it first class as far as reception is concerned. But the one thing I wish I would have done a little different that it was photography. You know, we have hundreds of pictures of that day, but none of them are really professional. I mean, his cousin gave me some great shots of that day, but all of them are done just on personal cameras and no real professional pictures. But I still love that day, and it just, every time I look at those pictures, they put a smile on my face. Is the first year of marriage really the hardest? Well, of course, in our situation, being a instant family, it certainly was. I mean, we had the growing pains, you know, just like every young married couple, and especially young married, you know, parents. We had obstacles that we had to work through, and especially as our marriage got older, you know, Brian didn't have any kids, and so he really didn't have anything to draw from. So I had to be patient with him. You know, some of his opinions and advice were not what I would have said or thought, you know, and so we just had to work through those type things, especially in the process of raising teenagers. You know, we went through a few situations to where, you know, I thought we were going to, you know, go crazy. It certainly tested our marriage. It tested our faith. It tested a lot of things, but we certainly come out of it, and because we did love each other, and no matter what obstacle we encountered, you know, our marriage was still a priority. All right, let's see. What advice do you give newlyweds? I think, you know, something that comes to mind is, you know, you've got to spend time with each other. I don't care if you're poor as a church mouse. You have got to make time for each other. I don't care if it's some cheese and crackers and you go to the park and have a picnic. You know, I don't care if you hold hands and walk the dog. I mean, you have got to make some time for your other person. I don't care work schedules conflict. I mean, our first 10 years of marriage, you know, my husband worked the night shift, and so I literally was a single mother, a married single mother. For, you know, when it came to ball games and school functions and all that kind of stuff. And in some ways I kind of resented it, but then in some ways, you know, he made up for it in others. So you know, you just have to make time with each other. And my mom always kind of teased me, said, well, maybe that's the secret to people's marriages. You know, you're like two ships that pass in the night. But we really did. We really missed each other. And so I would say for the last, you know, well, I'd say that between dating and the first 6 years of marriage, he worked night shift. Now, the last 8 years, he's been on day shift, like Monday through Friday. And we've had a lot normal life, you know, but unfortunately, 8 years ago is when my kids, you know, started moving out, and my kids were nearly grown. And so, you know, I just hate that he missed a lot of those, you know, teenager type thing, you know, ball games and high school things and stuff like that. Let's see, and another thing is, you know, and I heard, you know, Dixie Debutantes say this, you know, you have got to keep yourself presentable. I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about, you know, gaining weight or anything like that, because, you know, that's a whole different issue. But you have got to, you know, want to, you know, I don't know. Even to this day, I don't really like my husband to see me without makeup. He does, and we tease each other. I'm saying, see all this natural, you know, you married all this, and we just tease each other all the time. And I don't know. I just I try to look my best for my husband, when, you know, as well as I can. And you know, it's important to me that he still finds me attractive. That he, you know, and because he has always made me feel like he is proud of me, that he is proud to take me places. I mean, that's one thing from the get-go. I've always felt that way, that he is so proud to take me places. And so, and I do that. I just love him for that. The last question is, if you're religious, how has your faith influenced your marriage? Well, you know, I'll be honest with you. You know, Brian grew up Catholic and I grew up Baptist Methodist, and we have really never been super active as a couple in a church. Now, the kids and I, Yes, I mean we were active in church, but because of his work schedule and things, there was just that was always an issue, and but Brian and I, even though we weren't really, and he did go to church, do certain things with us, special events and stuff, but as a couple in couples class and things like that, we've never done that. But I do know that Brian and I have very similar, values and core values and the way we feel and think. We absolutely think that your salvation is not based on money, and it's not based on the clothes you wear and what church you go to and things like that. That it is based on the fruits of your labor and just you having a servant's heart. And I tell you, I'll be the first one to say that my husband has a servant's heart, professionally and personally. I mean, there's probably half the people in this neighborhood, my husband has done something for them just to be a friendly neighbor and just just a good person. If he knew if someone needed the shirt off his back, he would give it to them. And so, it's one of those things where that is the kind of character that I wanted my son to grow up and see. My husband, my son has a great father. He's got a great stepfather. He's got great grandparents, my ex-in-laws, and I wanted it to be a man that my son admired and looked up to. And my son is just lucked up and had so many wonderful role models. And so and that's what I mean just at the very beginning about honesty and integrity and character, and those are all godly traits that just make me stay in love with my husband. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed some of the insight of what I had about our relationship and our marriage, and if you are watching this video and you would like to share your marriage story, the happily married tag, please do. I would love to hear your story and share how you met and things like that. So with that being said, thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do for future videos, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.